Thank you for joining me today. I'm Madeline Blair, and this is Unlocked, a show all about building the resilient leader in you. Today, I'm going to be talking with Eric Wentworth, who knows a thing or three about recruitment and your career. And after our conversation, I'll be giving you grounds for thought. So stay tuned and find out what's brewing. Welcome back. I'm Madeline Blair, and this is Unlocked. And we're going to be talking today with Eric Wentworth. I often ask my guests to tell me about how they got to where they are today. What was their path? Almost every person talks about the unexpected nature of their career and the steps that led them to their current position. Yet, we advise young people to decide what they want to be and to plan for it. The world changes every day. We are overwhelmed with the amount of new technology and implications to the skills needed to do the resultant work changes. Yet, lifelong learning takes a back seat to the demands of how we fill our lives with long hours at work and constant interruption of media. So how do you prepare for so many changes? How do you assure you are always able to be hired? Eric Wentworth is an expert in all things marketing and communication. He is co-founder and director of operations and marketing at Wentworth Executive Recruiting. He's also the co-founder and creative director of Arranger Inc., an online meeting scheduler. In addition, he has built a retail coffee company and helped launch 3 internet firms. Wow, what a record. He's won more than 50 top creative awards in all media for companies such as Mercedes-Benz, Volvo, Baxter Healthcare. Wentworth is also the author of 4 books: A Mindful Career, I hope he'll talk about that a bit, A Plan for Life, Secret Lives, and A Mindful Workplace. I'm thrilled to bring on someone who can actually address the kinds of questions people in today's workforce are asking of themselves. So I'm going to ask you to please welcome Eric Wentworth to Unlocked.
Hi, Madeline.
Hello, Eric.
I'm so pleased to be on your show.
Oh, listen, it's great to have you. I've been so looking forward to this conversation because I know you have so much to offer. I just want to jump right in, and I want to begin with the current state of things. People are being let go of, they're being fired, and they want to move, they want to pursue their careers. Tell me about this marketplace that we're in today.
It's a crazy marketplace right now. I've often said that recruiters are like the canaries in the coal mine for the economy because we see things starting to happen about 6 months before they actually happen. And looking back to 2022, that was a crazy good year, especially for recruiters. And we were filling jobs as fast as we possibly could back then. And then we got into 2023. It was still very strong. And sometime around March or April, it was as if the recruiting business fell off of a cliff. All of a sudden, companies weren't hiring. And thousands of recruiters who hadn't prepared for the inevitable cycle that always goes down at some point lost their jobs or their businesses. And only the better recruiters have continued on. And then we started seeing the layoffs, and that frightened a lot of people. All of this was happening while some of the macroeconomic news was actually pretty positive. Yeah. It still is, really. And last month, I think we added 200,000 jobs. The month before, 300,000 jobs. In a normal economy, that's decent. Because I still remember the days of the Great Recession when there were like 800,000 jobs being lost in a single month. Yeah. So unemployment is still at a record low of below 4%. Hiring shortages exist in some industries, but what's getting hit hard right now are the middle management and upper management people, especially white collar jobs. And I suspect that artificial intelligence, or at least the anticipation of incorporating artificial intelligence into their operations, is causing some of the companies to cut back. That, and also I don't think it can be discounted that they want to try to look good to Wall Street too.
Always, always.
So it's crazy right now. For the last 4 years, we were predicting that there wouldn't be a recession when some of the big name economists were actually saying they expected one to happen. And then they changed their tune. Now we're thinking there's a good chance that there will be a recession. And I don't think it's going to be across the board recession because this economy is affecting different industries in different ways. But the Fed has not cut rates. Inflation is still really high. And I think, frankly, my opinion on that is a lot of it is greedflation. Companies are taking this opportunity to raise their prices while they're sitting oftentimes on a boatload of money. So we're entering some dicey times, and for Americans have been like a punching bag since the beginning of this century. When you think about it, we started off with the tech meltdown, and then we had 9/11,
Yep.
and then we had the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and then we had the Great Recession, which was frankly very close to being a depression, which cost literally millions of people their jobs, their homes, their savings. And then just as we were recovering from that, we have the pandemic, right? And then recently we have all this political discord. So I think people are suffering from a collective PTSD, if you will. And it's affecting people's mental health. And you probably have seen a lot of articles and posts about how to improve your mental health because it's so needed right now. But yeah, we're in some weird times.
I'll tell you, I haven't heard that particular enumeration. It's a little frightening.
It is.
The interesting thing is our economy is better than probably any other economy in the world in
Right.
terms of what we're doing. So even though it may have felt difficult and hard, we're still better off.
Yeah, it's a confluence of a lot of different things happening right now. Some of it political, but people feel that things are worse than they actually are in many respects.
Yeah.
And I think also that the rising prices makes people think that everything is bad.
Yeah.
But some of the fundamentals are still pretty strong. And like you said, we're doing better than a lot of other countries.
Oh, yeah.
Americans are focused on America. They're not focused on Great Britain.
We have a tendency to do that.
Yes.
In the midst of all of this, I know that as a person who is pursuing a career, how do you manage that? Can you plan within this? What should they be thinking about and doing?
Yeah, it's very difficult to manage your career. And that's why I think probably 80 to 90% of people don't manage their career very effectively. Also, among many young people, there's a feeling these days that you should just let things happen, and treat your career, as they say, organically. There's some validity to that, but I'm a basic believer in managing your career. And that doesn't mean that you can't be flexible. It doesn't mean you can't change your direction. It just means that you, first of all, take care of some of the fundamentals, and then secondly, incorporate other things that will help you manage your career. And the fundamentals I'm talking about are things like your resume. We see literally thousands, tens of thousands of resumes, and most of them are from middle management and C-level. You would be astonished at the number of lousy resumes there are. It's like your calling card to a company. It's the basic thing you got to get right, and yet so many people have terrible resumes. So that's one of the basics. Learning how to interview, for example. Most people just wing it. They go into an interview and they just hope for the best. And we always recommend that people practice it with a good friend. It may seem awkward, a little embarrassing, but it really helps to practice what you're going to say, maybe even record what you're going to say.
Mm-hmm.
Although if you're like me, most people don't like the sound of their own voice, right?
I can tell you that if you do it long enough, you get used to your own voice.
Yeah. It always sounds different than you think.
Absolutely.
But we also tell them, look at the company. Make sure you understand what this company does. We even advise that they go into LinkedIn and check out some of the people that work at the company. Make sure that what these people are doing, look at their recommendations, look at Glassdoor to see what recommendations are about the company. Those aren't always accurate because Glassdoor tend to get people who are disgruntled employees, right? But it can give you some insight.
Mm-hmm.
We then tell them to look at all the press clippings about the company, look at the history of the company. Very few people do this kind of preparation. We've had instances where people have gone into an interview and they thought they were interviewing at a different company. It wasn't our client. We prepare them a lot better than that, but we've heard of this happening.
Wow.
And in fact, in our book, we have a little section where we talk about some of the funniest things that happen in interviews, like the young lady who brought her mother in with her to the interview. Another woman brought in a lunch from McDonald's and basically ate her lunch during the interview. The things that you've heard have happened during interviews are just mind-boggling. Fortunately, our candidates go in and they are really well prepared for their interview. But that's another one of those basic things that you need to have if you're going to manage your career. That's one of the basic things you need to have. There are a lot of other things too, like having a good, strong network.
Mm.
I'm
Yes.
always surprised at how many people have not made the effort. And you really do have to make a bit of an effort to not only have a good personal network, like people have very few friends these days, but also their professional network, which is frankly very easy to build if you're a LinkedIn user.
Yeah.
And I think LinkedIn, frankly, is another one of those basics for many people in their careers. I've been a LinkedIn user since 2004, literally when they started.
Mm.
So I've seen all the iterations that have taken place over the years. And basically, I think LinkedIn's done a pretty good job of responding to their customers,
Mm-hmm.
users, and also just trying out different things.
Yep.
I've seen everything from the time when they used to have a book club on LinkedIn, which I miss actually because I like books, right? They're always trying something new. For someone to jump into it cold, it is a little intimidating, I have to admit. But it's not something that you can't pick up in a few days of dedicated effort.
As you're talking about this, I'm thinking about how a person would approach buying a house, for example. Well,
Yeah.
you would really think about what is it that you want in the house, what size, what's your budget. You would look at multiple houses. And you're right. You don't think that way when it talks about stepping into another job, even though that job may be worth more in the long run than your house would be.
Mm-hmm.
So doing due diligence is really the key here.
Absolutely. Due diligence is what's important for everything, I think, but especially when you're doing things that impact your career. We were talking last night on another podcast about relationships, especially romantic and love relationships. And I think even there you need to do your due diligence. We have software that enables us to do background checks on people. And it's always amazing what we find sometimes, which is another reason why people need to conduct their lives in an honorable way so they don't have these little things following them around their whole life, arrest records and drug charges and things of that sort, because it can make a difference if it's between two candidates that are equally qualified and one has a couple of red flags on in their career path. That can usually spell the difference. Yeah, in terms of career management, I believe that 80% to 90% of people don't do it well. They don't know how to do it well. And unfortunately, our schools don't do a very good job of teaching it. So people graduate. Sometimes they don't even know what they want to do in life. In fact, I think that's the majority of people. They don't really know what they want to do. They haven't found something that's either a strong interest or a passion. The luckiest people are those who have a passion.
Yes.
And let's take a famous singer, for example, like a Miley Cyrus. She was singing when she was 12 years old, and she knew that's all she ever wanted to do.
Mm.
There are other people who have a great talent or a passion about something. My passion was writing, and that basically funnels the direction of their entire career. So it's easy to manage your career when you have a path that you want to stay on. And that doesn't mean that your path can't change. You can't add new things. I started off after graduating from journalism school as a journalist. And I found right away that there were a couple of things I didn't like about journalism. One was the abysmal pay. I thought, do I want to live at home and be a journalist, or do I actually want to get on with my life?
Yeah.
And so I ended up going into advertising on the creative side,
Mhm.
and I was still able to write and create. And it was a much different career than journalism. It was a lot of fun. It was exciting, and I happened to be in it during the golden age of advertising. I would particularly want to be in it today. So that directed my own path. But along the way, just because I'm a curious person about a lot of things, and I have a lot of interests, one of which is travel, I started a travel company. And I'd taken a sabbatical for a year after selling an ad agency that I owned. And I took some of the money and I said, I'm just going to spend it all. Everybody said, you're crazy. You're going to screw up your whole career.
I will not ask you how young you were when you did that.
I was in my mid 30s.
Wow.
Yeah,
That takes courage.
I was 38 or 39.
Wow.
Yeah, and my career had been going really well at that point, and everyone said, "Why are you going to screw things up?" I said, "Because I just want to do this." And so I took a year off, traveled all over Europe, visited practically every art museum in Europe because that's another interest I have. Saw all the sites. I had some adventures. Yeah, it was great fun. And I came back from that, and because automobiles are another interest I have, and I'd visited some automobile museums and even went to a factory while I was over there during the sabbatical. And so I came back and I said, "Oh, I had so much fun doing that. I bet a lot of other people would like to do that." So I started a company called International Motor Tours, and for several years I conducted tours for car enthusiasts to Europe.
Wow.
Yeah, so you can see how you can stray off the path now and then. And another thing I like is coffee. So I said, I'm going to start a chain of coffee houses. And that went well until it didn't. We had a coffee house in Santa Barbara. We had another one in Sausalito, California. And then the Great Recession hit. And frankly, we were basically wiped out because we had put all of our money into building this mini chain of, we were going to do a mini chain of 15 coffee houses up and down the coast of California, and then hopefully sell out to Starbucks for a boatload of money, right?
As you're telling this story, what occurs to me is you haven't said that you were fired, but in cases where a person is actually with a company, they may actually get fired. It's the same thing. All of a sudden, everything is gone. How do you prepare for that?
That's an excellent question, and I was fired once. It's what's really terrible, and we ran into this just last week with someone because we're getting a lot of calls now from people who've been fired. So I was fired after doing an incredibly good job at this ad agency, but the ad agency wanted to merge with another ad agency, and one of the requirements was that the creative director from the other ad agency now be the creative director at this ad where I was. After all this good work, I was out on the streets and I was shocked and unprepared for it. Just like someone we spoke to literally 3 days ago. And this is someone we know because we had placed him one time. And he was in a really good job, making good money, but he didn't prepare to get fired. So I think people get complacent and there's this kind of inertia built in. They've got a good job and they know they're doing good work and they think I'll just be here forever. Maybe my father was in a job forever. He actually was in the same job forever, but that's not reality these days. We'll change jobs a lot. And so we're creating this course right now. And one of the modules in this course is how to prepare to be fired. Because at some point or another, you will lose your job or you'll quit your job because you have a toxic boss, because you just see a better opportunity. So in those cases, you need to be prepared for that transition. And it's more complicated than most people think. Not only should you have an emergency fund so you don't have that financial pressure weighing on you, which can cause you to make a bad decision. But most people then don't know how to look for a job. They don't know how. You'd be surprised at the number of people who don't even know what recruiters do. So many people think we're in the business of finding people jobs. That's not what recruiting is all about. Recruiters work for their clients to find the best people that they can
People.
for positions they have available. We're really not in the business of finding people jobs. Now, we do that occasionally only because we're trying to be good people.
Sure.
We want to give back. We belong to a couple of great charitable organizations where we contribute a lot, but we can't do it all the time. And that's why we came up with the idea for launching a course, because we thought maybe we can help thousands of people if we give them all the instruction they need from start to finish and how to manage your career, how to choose a career, how to choose maybe a new career direction, all the basics like doing the resume and the interviewing and all
Mm-hmm.
that, but also bring in the other things that are so important to career success. And it's not just one thing, it's not linear. It's also your mental health, how, especially these days, right?
Mm-hmm.
Seems like everybody's going crazy. But how's your mental health? How's your social circle? What are some things you can do to improve your mental health? We teach people how to do breath work, for example.
Mm-hmm.
We teach people how to do meditation.
Mm-hmm.
We encourage people all the time, but especially during those times when you're out of work, get out there and volunteer and try to help other people. There's some kind of a strange dynamic that goes on. When you need help yourself and you go out and help someone,
Yeah.
it comes back to you.
I think we're designed for that
I think so too.
because we cannot live alone. We can't. I don't want to call us a herd animal, but we certainly are a social animal.
No, that's very true. Yeah, I think everyone should adopt a charity or some sort of altruistic thing that they do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We we know some young people who, and I'm surprised at the number of young people who do this. I don't remember when I was the same age, so many people getting involved in charitable activities. But we live near the ocean, and we know a couple of young people who almost every other weekend they're out there helping clean up the beaches,
Uh-huh.
or they're planting these plants that are supposed to keep the sand dunes from
Yep.
washing away,
Yes.
or they're volunteering. We have a really wonderful place here in Sausalito called the Marine Mammal Center, and it rescues marine animals and rehabilitates them and then releases them back into the ocean. We know people who are volunteering for that, and they get a lot out of it. And here's the other thing: you meet some really incredible people. I really think some of the best people are involved in charitable activities. And who knows, these people may come around to being a lead for a job or maybe even hire you.
This goes back to your earlier point that we need to be developing relationships, professional relationships. And you may not think this is professional because you're doing some altruistic thing, but in fact, it may turn into being something like that. Yeah.
Oh,
And when I talk to people about resilience, that social network is part of what keeps you resilient because you have literally a foundation that's holding you up. Yeah.
no, and I read your book, and I really believe that resilience, especially these days, is so important. And resilience leads to resourcefulness, which you need to be these days. You need to
Mhm.
think outside the box sometimes. After we lost our coffee house, we lost all of we lost all our money, frankly. We had to do a lot of things that we ordinarily wouldn't do just to keep the money flow going.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I tell people who are out of work, I said, do something to bring in some money, some kind of a side hustle do something, because keeping that money flow going
Mm-hmm.
is good for you psychically.
Psychically.
And who knows, you might even be able to put it on your resume. And what employers are always asking, why was there this 9-month gap in your resume? I tell people, just be honest. First of all, don't even get me started on the number of discrepancies and dishonesties on resumes, right? These days, that is career suicide. You have got to be honest, even if it
Mm.
doesn't look good, because there's so many ways that people can find out the truth. So we always just tell people, not because it's just a good thing to do as a human being to be honest, but it really works in your favor in the end. So if you have a 9-month gap, and let's say that for 9 months, we belong to an organization, a wonderful organization called Partnerships for Change. And just recently, they did the first video ever showing Pope Francis and the Dalai Lama together. The
Ah,
first time that it happened. And they do wonderful things like this. And through Partnerships for Change, we have met the most incredible people, including someone who's now one of my very best friends and the co author of another book that I'm writing. Mark Benioff is part of this group. It has been, of all the charities we've been involved in, this has been the one that has actually come back to us in more positive ways than I ever imagined. So anyway, getting back to telling people to do something during that 9-month gap in their linear career. And I don't know anybody that's going to have a linear career in the
yeah,
future.
not anymore.
Just say, what happened? There was a layoff. I lost my job. For 9 months, while I was looking for another position, I volunteered as a marketing person for Partnerships for Change. And I helped them do this and this.
Yeah. Demonstration that you've kept your skills active as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it
You know,
may, who knows, it may even lead to something. We know people who have been in that exact position who have then volunteered. For example, there's Guide Dogs for the Blind. There's an organization here in Marin County. And we know someone who volunteered and then ended up getting a full-time position there that she
mm,
loves.
wow.
So you never know where these things are go. And then what you said earlier, I think is so important, that your friends and your family and your whole social network are so important to your career, because you would not believe how many people find jobs through friends and family. These are the people who know you the best, right?
Mhm.
They may know you in some ways better than you do. And I once got a job that changed the whole trajectory of my life because my best friend's mother, and this kind of dates me, she saw an ad in the newspaper, and she knew that I was looking for another job at the time. And she told my roommate, or my friend, and he was my roommate for a while, about this job. And she says, "Oh, maybe Eric would like this job." And so I looked at it and I thought, that's worth looking into. And it, through an incredible set of circumstances, it turned out to be a job that brought me out to California. I was living in Chicago at the time.
Mm.
And so that changed my whole life. And had that friend's mother not been thoughtful enough to, and not seen that ad, she very well, I don't even know what she was doing looking at the one ads in the paper of all things. Those kind of serendipitous things do happen,
You
and
know,
they happen frequently through your social network.
as you're talking, I'm thinking about the fact that, uh, okay, I'm not looking for a job right now, but I know that one of the things I do if I come across an article, for example, that's just really insightful, I will send it to someone who I think would have interest in it. And as you're talking, I'm thinking that is a great way to not just create that professional network, but to really support it because you don't know what it's going to mean even in their lives when they read it and something really becomes clear to them. Uh, this is very satisfying for me because I've
That's
done it for
excellent.
years and I just do it because I think they'll be interested. And now
Mhm.
I can see it could really be benefit, and it maybe I will never know the benefit. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that because it's something I used to do, and I've somehow gotten out of practice of doing that. But you're right, and it shows that you were thoughtful enough to do something like you cared about another person.
Mhm.
People like
Mhm.
to be cared for, right?
They like to be simply remembered in their mind, and you send them something like that, and it says, "Yes, I do think about you." Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to go back though to this business about the abrupt changes, whether you're fired, you're laid off, whether you suddenly something happens in your personal life that makes shifts. I think one of the things I've never heard anybody really talk about is the fact that you should have some kind of margin, financial margin,
And sorry, what was that?
of to have some financial margin built
Yeah.
into your budget, so to speak. Someone asked me the other day about something, how do you do this? And I said, it's very simple. I'm married to a really wonderful spouse, and we own our home. It took us many years to get to that point, but it gives you enormous flexibility. Now, not everybody can attain that, but you attain it by this aspect of always remembering that something can happen. It's can you have a small margin to set aside? It comes back to your earlier point. When you're in a situation, you sometimes don't think as clearly. So you want to have just that little bit of something that keeps you calm.
No, I am a huge believer in that. And I've you read these statistics about how 40% of Americans are basically living paycheck to paycheck. But it's interesting, there are people who are making very good salaries and they don't have an emergency fund of any kind. So this gets back to something we're actually putting in our course about how you've got to manage your finances well if you want to have a good career. Here's two basic reasons why. You're probably going to need it sometime when you get fired. So just like you said, you don't make a rash decision because you have to. We get so many people say, "I got to find a job. I got to find it." They're desperate.
Mm-hmm.
They have no fallback, and they will oftentimes make a poor decision. The other reason is that there will be opportunities that come along in everybody's life, and I know this has happened for me several times. And if you don't have the financial wherewithal to take advantage of that opportunity, you're going to miss that opportunity. And that opportunity could have led to a
Yeah.
whole different career. It could have led to something that's much more satisfying than what you've been doing. So for that reason alone, and it does take some financial discipline. If you can put away enough money so that even if you've just got $5,000 or $10,000, at this point in my life, I think 25,000 is the kind of emergency fund that really gives you peace of mind, right? Because you can probably last for 6 months if you really need to on that kind of money. And it just requires discipline and cutting some things out. But even a few $1,000s makes a big difference for most people.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so sorry for this fellow that we spoke with last week who lost his job after 8 years at this company. And he was making pretty good money and he owns a home. So that's a good thing. But he had no savings. And so the first thing we were doing was talking to him, how can you give yourself a little breathing room here financially first?
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't even want to go into an interview feeling desperate. It's like animals can sense fear. I think hiring authorities can sense it when you're desperate. And the best way to go in is feeling confident and relaxed. That's your bottom line in conducting a good interview. You don't want to go in there stressed out and anxious. So for that reason, I think it's a good idea to have a little emergency fund.
It goes back really to some of the early points you made. Really think about what is in your resume. Really prepare yourself when you're getting ready to go into an interview. All those things add to your I'll call it your feeling of safety, your feeling of comfort, because you know you've done what you should be doing to get ready. I really like that.
I think a strong LinkedIn presence is also
Mm.
important these days for not all positions, but most of them. And LinkedIn has evolved to the point now where it's a really robust platform. LinkedIn Learning, for example, can give you credentials that you might be able to use to help gain some leverage for a future job. And what LinkedIn does is they also indicate that on your profile. You can take courses, free courses, through some top universities like Yale and Harvard, Stanford. And when you take a course that impacts your career in some way, and you list it on your LinkedIn profile, it shows up with it even shows up with the little school's logo. And here's a little trick. Some companies like to hire from certain universities. And so if you haven't gone to that university, you won't show up when they do a search. If you have taken a course, however, at that university, you will show up in the search. And maybe they will be intrigued enough with your skills and experience to give it a good look. So it's a little bit of a tricky way to get onto the radar screen of companies
Well,
that want to hire from certain universities.
yes, and it's a legitimate one. You have done something to get that.
And LinkedIn also allows you to have recommendations from people.
Mm-hmm.
We always tell people you should always have your references in order so that you don't have to go scrambling for them if you lose a job. And almost nobody does, to be honest, but they should. However, on LinkedIn, people will give recommendations, and third-party endorsement like that is, I was in the advertising business. When you have people who endorse your product, that's a really strong position. And like my wife has, she's got just an amazing number of over-the-top recommendations. And so we get business, frankly, because people go in, they look at her LinkedIn profile and they go, "Oh my God, look at all these recommendations." She like walks on water. But you can also have all of your skills listed, and people can weigh in on whether or not you have that skill. So a recruiter who looks at that will say, "Oh my gosh, there's 80 people who think that this person is a good communicator, or 80 people who think this person has good software engineering skills." And that helps. We also tell people that whenever possible, make sure that your LinkedIn profile is really written well. And it doesn't have to follow a specific format. There are different ways of writing a profile well. But your skills and experience portion of the profile should align with your resume. If there's discrepancies there, you then have to explain it. And that can be a little monkey wrench in the whole process of getting hired. So they should sync up, is what I'm saying. And also, and this is something we did a survey on about 4 years ago. It was our own little test to see how many people had what we considered to be professional or acceptable photographs. LinkedIn, this is the great thing about LinkedIn. It is still not considered acceptable to put your photograph on a resume, but it is just the opposite on LinkedIn. You're expected to have a photograph on LinkedIn. So this is a good way to present yourself, hopefully in a real positive light. However, when we looked into the photographs of people on LinkedIn, we were shocked at how many of them were just awful. So many times it's like your brother took a snapshot of you that you happened to, and that's what you use for your LinkedIn profile, but it's not professional at all. So we basically tell people, do two kinds of photographs, choose one, either have a professional photograph done or have a really good photograph showing you doing what you do. Like one of the best I've seen was a fellow who was a television producer, and it showed him behind the camera in that environment. I thought, wow, that's strong. That really immediately conveys what this person does, right?
Yeah.
And then if you go with the premium level, which is something I recommend everybody do because it opens you up to so many other services that you don't get on the free level, is that you can, on your profile, where your little photograph is on the left-hand side, and in the back, there's a background. So on the premium level, you're able to put in a photograph, well, anything you want in the background, which can help promote you. Like my wife has our book featured in that background. And so it's another way to make it work for you. And so that's important. Your headline is extremely important. What it is you do, or what it is you want to do, or how do you help people. There are lots of ways of writing it, but LinkedIn now gives you more room to do that than they ever had before. Back in the old days, you were limited to a certain number of characters, but that's not true anymore. You can also upload examples of your work to LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And this is something you can't do on a resume. For example, on my profile, I have a link to my creative work. We did this one promotion once that for a racing team, and we managed to get the race car in front of the White House. And we actually got President George Bush at the time to come out and pose with it. So it was a real coup, right?
Yeah.
And so I put that on my resume or on my LinkedIn profile. So there's lots of ways you can do that. And then if you post or if you do articles, you can have those will automatically appear on your LinkedIn profile. If you comment on other people's posts, which you can do strategically, by the way, comment on posts by companies that you might want to work for or by thought leaders that you want to follow and that you want. I mean, I've done this religiously almost every day. And I've actually developed personal relationships with people like Chip Conley, for example. He and I know each other well, and he endorsed our book. That all came about because I like what he does, and I commented on it, and I reposted it.
Yeah.
That's another way you can use LinkedIn. I could go on and on about LinkedIn, but if you learn how to use it well and you use it regularly, not
Yeah.
just when you're looking for a job, right?
Yep.
Use it regularly as a basic management tool. It can be a huge help to you. LinkedIn, frankly, has changed our lives,
Yeah.
and we wouldn't be able to do the business we're doing. I wouldn't have had some of the career opportunities I've had. I wouldn't have met some of the people that I've met if it hadn't been for LinkedIn.
Yeah. Hmm. All I can say is ditto. Eric, I cannot believe that our time is out, but I must say you gave us so many strategies. And the fact that LinkedIn is such a terrific platform where you don't have to spread yourself thin to try to do everything. There you have a really strong place to present all kinds of things.
What we tell people also, they should get themselves on the major job boards like ZipRecruiters or
Mhm.
Indeed. There are a
Mhm.
few. There's one for remote work called Remotely. Get listed on those. It may cost you a few dollars, but recruiters regularly go to those places. They pay big money. We pay sometimes over $3,000 a month just for ZipRecruiter. But it has produced a lot of great candidates. And we
Right.
always feel like the people who think enough about their career to go be listed on these job boards are serious about their careers too.
Yeah. Well, Eric, again, thank you so much for real advice, I must say. I'm sitting here and going, gee, I wish I had known that when
I
I
hope
was
some
out
of
there
this
looking.
conversation has helped people.
Good. I hope so too. I'm
They
sure
need
it
it
has,
right
actually. I'm sure it has. So, Eric Wentworth, thank you so much for being on Unlocked.
now. It was a pleasure. I think we could have had. You're one of those folks that I know I could talk with for 2, 3, 4 hours, and it would just be a wonderful conversation. So
Always.
thank you for the opportunity, and I really hope that what we've talked about today will help people.
It will indeed. Thank you. Every now and then, there is something that changes how I think about the world. Grounds for Thought is a place where I talk about these moments so that you can explore the meaning for yourself. When I entered the World Bank, I came in as a professional, but at the lowest professional grade level. Within 3 years, I was named a division chief. Over the next 3 years, my division had achieved every business objective, always stayed in budget, tested at the 90th percentile in the attitude survey, and we had grown 40%. We were one of the largest divisions in the bank at that time. Now, the bank was called the Golden Cage, but I knew that the cage door was never locked. So when my department took a major shift away from quality work, I made the decision to leave the bank and begin my own company. My colleagues thought I was crazy. I tell you this because when I read the opening section of Whitney Johnson's book, I thought I was reading my life story, not hers. The location was different. She was at Merrill Lynch, I was at the World Bank. The forces at work were the same. The levels of success were equivalent. The risk of failure was the same. The choice of self disruption was the same. I most definitely related to Whitney Johnson. And that's the book that I'm going to be talking about today. And it's called Disrupt Yourself by Whitney Johnson. The description of her career shifts was not what struck me from the book, however. Rather, it was her use of the S curve. Johnson talks about disruption by describing it as an S curve, like that. We've all seen them. The graph begins at the bottom left, rising slowly toward the right. Suddenly the curve shifts and rises sharply, and then it begins to slow. It stops rising and it continues on directly toward the right. Now, if you're following me, the graph might look like an S. In her book, Johnson references E.M. Rogers, who developed the S-curve model, as an attempt to understand how, why, and at what rate ideas and products spread throughout cultures. The new idea or product enters the market and slowly increases in sales over time. Then there is a moment when sales really begin to pick up and revenue shoots way up. And eventually the sales level out as the market is saturated. The places where the numbers begin to shoot up are called inflection points or tipping points. And when it begins to slow down, it's called the knee of the curve. She then compares this with the S-curve of personal disruption. Personal. The necessary pivots in our own career paths. Those times when we move from one place to another. In both her and my careers, we moved from corporate to entrepreneurism. In both cases, we began again on the S-curve of a new career. When we choose a self-disrupt, we must successfully navigate being able to learn, continue to learn more and more rapidly, and eventually attain mastery of the skills of the new place. I can remember serious times as I had to learn how to promote my business as well as perform when I was contracted to do something. It took me 3 to 5 years to get proficient at promotion as I continued to climb the learning curve to stay up with technology and lots more. Finally, I could take a breath and just maintain my competence. It was a classic S-curve of learning. Today, even if you are not choosing to pivot, layoffs are at a high rate today as companies work to maintain positioning against competitors. In all of this, I believe Johnson's work is a great metaphor for understanding. You are the one who is racing to learn and relearn up a curve to mastery, imposed or self-imposed. The risk is the same. But as a metaphor, knowing the S-curve gives you a sense of control in the midst of the risk-taking and hard work. The S-curve reminds me of the challenges and decisions when you're called on to be resilient in the face of an unexpected or even the expected. And like anyone who has chosen to move on when the unexpected occurs, you are strengthened through the struggle and feel able to meet the next imposed disruption with greater confidence. As someone who has always loved math, seeing it on a graph is very satisfying. It doesn't make it easier. It just makes it more understandable. Of course, there is a great deal more in her book about how you can handle the various stages that you're in with some very specific strategies, just like Eric gave us today. No matter where you are in your career, just understanding the S-curve helps you know you can get through it even when you think there couldn't be more to learn, and then see that there is more. Just knowing that you're traversing a known route gives you hope and the knowledge that you can do it. Wherever you are, ready for a pivot or fearing an imposed one, you should feel a bit more confident now. When the last time you had to run up the S-curve of learning from an unexpected event or even a chosen one. Does it make more sense now? Disrupt yourself. Master relentless change and speed up your learning curve by Whitney Johnson. Whitney also has a podcast, by the way, and you guessed it, it's called Disrupt Yourself. I want to thank you for joining me today. I hope that you've learned something new. And if you would like to turbocharge the resilient leader in you, go to my website and schedule a conversation. And if you're on YouTube, of course, I want you to click the like button. And of course, subscribe. I'm Madeline Blair, wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your resilient leader.